Hello there. I wanted to spend a little bit of time discussing the Dunning-Kruger effect. Something I've wanted to do a little video on for quite some time. Unfortunately, this is something I run into a lot, especially with running a tech channel on YouTube, and also doing some work with mathematics problems, science, and so on. And so I wanted to cover this topic. I know a lot of people have probably heard the name, may not be familiar with what it really is. But what I want to just say is that um, the Dunning-Kruger effect really comes about. Um, we've all had situations where we have people with little knowledge who often seem to be the most confident about things. I think we all know people who are convinced of their own expertise in a particular subject, even though there's clear evidence to the contrary that they really don't have any expertise in a particular subject. Um, we've all had that person, who will stand up in the middle of a company or a department meeting and they'll drag out the meeting with some kind of misguided suggestions or comments, completely unrelated stuff. Um, I think we've all had that. And how many of us have had a family member who's become an expert on an illness from Googling one article from WebMD or they think they understand a scientific subject completely just because they watched one PBS documentary. Um, and how many of us have had someone, and I've run into this a lot, especially with the mathematics problems. How many have had that one person who says that back in their day, multiplication did not have precedence over addition unless you had parentheses or brackets. And then they'll go and they'll point to some random Quora post that claims that BODMAS, which is an acronym for Order of Operations, they'll claim that BODMAS wasn't introduced into the national curriculum in the UK until 1988, all because they read a Quora post that some random person posted. I've seen that one a lot. Um, and I think we've all seen it on online forums, especially. I think the internet has really given um, a lot of rise to this. But we've all seen really low competence individuals argue with actual experts on just about every topic imaginable. I don't know how many of you have seen others who actually agree with Terrence Howard, for example, that one times one equals two. It's absolute nonsense, but yet I'll see an online forum and a lot of people assume that Terrence is smart, and they also assume that they're smart. They assume that they're just a misunderstood genius. I see that a lot. But my real goal here is to try to explain what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, where it came from, um, also how technology plays a dual role in it today. Technology can help stem the tide of this, but it also promotes the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I want to talk about that a little bit as we go along through here. And in the meantime, you can see some of the quotes that really relate to this issue. But first of all, what is the Dunning-Kruger effect? Well, it's it's a cognitive bias where people with low ability overestimate their own competence. And if you can easily contrast that with people, I know a lot of scientists, I know a lot of very educated people who often they tend to underestimate their skills. You'll find that people who have high competence will underestimate their skills and they'll often defer to another expert. If you have a scientist or you have someone who's an astrophysicist and they are fielded a question on a topic about medicine or perhaps something about biology, they'll often defer and say to defer to a biologist or maybe defer to a medical doctor because they'll say, well, my expertise is in astrophysics, but that might be a topic, I think I know what it might be, but you might want to talk to someone who's an expert in that field. That's often what will happen when you run into people who are actually competent. But this Dunning-Kruger cognitive bias, it's really, part of a broader set of cognitive biases. But where did this whole thing get its name from? Dunning-Kruger. Um, well, David Dunning and Justin Kruger were both psychologists. They're both psychologists at Cornell University. And they had this groundbreaking 1999 study where they did some research. They did a paper and they looked at people who scored in the bottom quartile on tests of humor, grammar, logic, and they found out that these people grossly overestimated their performance. They found a cognitive bias in the people who did really bad. The people who did really poorly on these tests thought they did really well. They thought they were very intelligent and they thought they did really well. So in this study, they discovered this cognitive bias, which will probably always forever be known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Um, and one of the things that David Dunning Dunning and Kruger both were very interested in was this. There was this story about the lemon juice bandit, which you may or may not have heard about. It's about 20 years ago now. I think it was back in 1995, but it was a famous case where a man believed lemon juice would make him invisible to security cameras when he went to rob a bank. And I'll kind of try to explain that a little bit. But back in January of 1995, there were a couple men by the names of MacArthur Wheeler and Clifton Earl Johnson, and they robbed two banks in the Pittsburgh area at gunpoint, and they really made no attempts to disguise themselves. Instead, they covered their faces in lemon juice and they thought that it would make him invisible to security cameras. I think Johnson was arrested a few days later, and then Wheeler was later apprehended. I think a couple months later, after they were both, after being identified in the security photographs from the surveillance cameras, and I think both got sentences. I don't know how long they were, multiple years, I believe. But the robberies directly inspired uh, the Dunning and Kruger as far as their research. They were directly inspired by this case. And it perfectly describes people who have little ability um, in a given field, and they believed that they actually had competence in it. Neither of these two robbers they wore a mask at all. They made no attempts to disguise themselves because they thought the lemon juice would hide their faces. And apparently Wheeler had told Johnson, or actually Wheeler said that Johnson had told him that lemon juice would make a person invisible to security cameras because he understood that lemon juice can kind of function almost like an invisible ink. So he made the inference that, well, if lemon juice can act like an invisible ink, all I need to do is cover my face with lemon juice, and now I'll be hidden from the surveillance cameras. So he did a little bit of research, and that little bit of research, he believed it made himself an expert. And I guess Wheeler was initially skeptical about it, but the story goes that I guess he tested this method out by covering his face with lemon juice, and then he tried to capture an image with a Polaroid camera. And apparently, as he was trying to take a picture of himself, he somehow missed himself in the photo, so he trusted this method to be effective. Apparently, I don't know exactly how he went about it. He tried maybe to point the Polaroid camera at himself, missed himself in the image, and looked at the Polaroid picture that came out and didn't see himself in it, so he assumed that the lemon juice must have worked. I know it seems pretty unbelievable, but I guess that's how the story goes. Um, and I guess the detectives thought maybe his absence in that image was either caused by bad film, misadjusted camera, or maybe Wheeler unintentionally, pointed the camera away from himself or away from his face and missed it. But either way, Wheeler was convinced that this lemon juice would hide him. Um, but but really, a good scientific term for what the Dunning-Kruger effect is that it's really metacognition. Metacognition is the term I'm looking for. It's where low-skilled individuals lack the ability to recognize their own mistakes. Metacognition, it's the practice of being aware of one's own thinking and planning, monitoring, being able to monitor and evaluate your own learning. Um, Metacognition helps people learn, make them learn better. You can make sound decisions, and you're going to be able to solve problems more effectively if you understand, if you're aware of your own thinking and your own planning, and you're able to monitor that and evaluate it and understand that, hey, maybe my planning is not working out here. Maybe I need to study up on something. Um, Most people are capable of looking at their learning and making adjustments to it based on, information that they understand is flawed. But people who suffer from this lack of metacognition are really unable to do so. Um, Now, one famous thing is this curve. There is a Dunning-Kruger curve where you can basically look at confidence versus knowledge and skill. And what you're going to find out, and by the way, this comes from hustleescape.com. So I want to give a note to where this particular graph comes from. It's from Hustle Escape. Um, but people who have very low knowledge, you look at this knowledge on this x-axis, people with the low knowledge, they're like, well, their confidence is very high. They think, well, this is very easy. They look something up and they think it's very easy. Um, but as you gain knowledge, you start gaining a little bit of knowledge, people will realize, hey, you know what? It's a little harder than I thought, this particular subject. And then there are people who you get a little bit more knowledge, and some people may even believe something's hopeless. Their confidence might be low. They're struggling with something in math or science. And then you gain even more knowledge. You keep getting more knowledge, more skill. Oh, I'm starting to get the hang of this. Okay, it's hard, but it's not so bad that I can't get through it. And then as your knowledge and skill keeps increasing, you've got it. Hey, I've got it, but damn, this is complicated. Okay, so your confidence is going up at some point as your knowledge and skill increases. And we would all hope that that would be the way it should be. But unfortunately, you've got the people way back here with a very low knowledge, very low skill, but their confidence is way, way up here because they have nothing to reference to. They don't have the knowledge to realize that, hey, I don't know what I don't know. So yeah, pretty clear. And I love the quote from David Dunning. It says the first rule of the Dunning Kruger Club is that you don't know that you're a member of the Dunning Kruger Club. And yeah, that is true. So yeah, really, as far as the role of technology, technology is kind of a double-edged sword in a way. Technology does help to combat this problem with metacognition because with you have access to quality education these days, and things are much easier to get. Back when I was a kid, you'd have to go to the library, maybe go talk to the librarian, go to the card catalog, look up a book. If I was lucky enough that my parents invested in a set of World Book encyclopedias, so I could get what information I could from that. But I didn't have the internet. I didn't have YouTube. I didn't have online courses and forums. Today you've got for technology related questions, you've got open source platforms, like Stack Overflow, there's GitHub. where you've got feedback there that helps people learn. And you've got all the AI tools out there. You've got Chat GPT, Grok. You've got so many AI um, tools that you could use as well to ask questions and learn. But technology at the same time also enables this Dunning-Kruger effect. It creates echo chambers and misinformation, especially with social media. Social media rewards people's confidence over accuracy. In forums related to mathematics, I've seen this one a lot in the forums that I've looked at, especially like on Facebook, where you'll see a mathematics problem listed. People will often seek herd immunity, and they'll assume that because a lot of other people are just as incorrect as they were, they must all be correct. Um, there's low barriers out there too to publishing opinions on the internet. You're going to find a lot of blogs out there. Um, I've got some videos where I've actually covered this stuff, how people really have a hard time understanding what a credible source is. What is a reputable website? Like, you've got the Khan Academy out there, you've got reputable sources from universities to find information. And yet people will go and they'll do a Google search and get a result from some random blogger who says the answer is XYZ, which is completely wrong, but they think it's truth just because they saw it on the internet. So yeah, the low barriers to publishing opinions. Anybody can sound like an expert online. And that can be true of me, except I'm relying on my educational background and my own ability to do research. Um, I've previously covered this in other videos, like I mentioned, with people with the blogs. Algorithms really favor engagement, often boosting confidence, but then incorrect content. So you're going to get, if you've got something online and a lot of people are commenting on it, you get 5,000 comments, 10,000 comments, 20,000 comments. Well, the algorithms, YouTube, Facebook, they'll push those posts out there to more and more and more people because more and more people are engaging with it in social media, which boosts the confidence in people giving incorrect answers. But the information is wrong, and I will see that all over on Facebook. Um, there's plenty of real world examples of this. With health. How many people out there with COVID were armchair virologists? During the pandemic, all of a sudden, they didn't know anything about virology, and all of a sudden they became experts. Technology. There's a lot of overconfident technical advice that comes from unqualified creators. I see it on YouTube. I see it on Facebook. I see it all over social media. How many people have seen Terrence Howard go on TV or be online or be interviewed by people in his complete misunderstanding of multiplication, where he makes this claim that 1 times 1 equals 2? You've got the workplace scenarios. How many people have, and everybody's seen this, I've been working for 35, 36 years now. How many people have seen in the workplace scenarios where you've got unqualified people that get leadership roles? I've done PLC programming. Actually, it's for over 35 years now, not 25. It's actually 35, believe it or not. Um, Honestly, it's been over 36. But I've done PLC programming, programmable logic controllers. I've done this for decades. And I had a manager once tell me how qualified he was now after taking a $20 online course. He wanted to do what I was doing because he took a $20 course. That was just one example from this one individual. Um, you know, Really, you can mitigate this issue by really, I want to encourage humility and lifelong learning. I don't know everything. I'm running a channel. I call it Steve's Tech Tube. I'm not an expert on everything. And if you talk to people who are really smart, they will tell you that. I know a guy, what's his name? Mike, K8MRD, amateur radio operator, has a really great channel. I believe it's called, I think it's called HamTube now. It used to be the K8 MRD radio stuff. And he will come out and tell you that he is a salesman. The guy's got an extra class license, which is very cool. I mean, to get an extra class license in amateur radio is not a simple thing. You have to know a lot of technical knowledge in order to get that license, but he's very humble about it. He will tell you if you ask him a specific technical question about an antenna or about something technical, he might tell you that, well, this is what I think, but I'm not an engineer. I'm not, I was a salesman. I believe he was a salesman. But still, the guy's very smart. He has quite a bit of knowledge, but yet he has humility, and I respect that very much. When people are like that, I do encourage peer feedback and critical thinking. Um, I see this a lot where people they don't accept any kind of peer feedback whatsoever. They become entrenched in their own belief that they're an expert. And use technology wisely. I've got some videos out there. Maybe I'll try to post some links to them, but basically I've gone through this before, trying to explain how to go look for credible information. And one of the most recent examples I've run into is that, Quora. I've seen people constantly when I mention, we get a problem that has mixed operations in mathematics where you've got addition and multiplication. People will say, well, look, BODMAS, which is just an acronym, they'll try to claim that BODMAS wasn't introduced until 1988, and they get this all from a random post. They'll do a Google search, which leads them to a random Quora post, and they accept that as fact, and it's completely false. But yeah, you know, Yeah, that one really stuns me that people will do that. And I've probably seen that Quora post referenced at least 20 times online from people who will try to make that claim. They'll say, "Well, look, I went to school and graduated in 1984, and BODMAS wasn't introduced till 1988." And it's totally untrue, but yet, you know, people who suffer from this metacognition problem, they're not able to discern credible sources from non-credible sources. So again, hopefully you understand at least a little bit about what the Dunning-Kruger effect is at this point. And I encourage everyone who's watching to self-reflect, stay curious, really stay curious. I see people who really lost all their curiosity and they're stuck in this mindset that everything is this way, a certain way, and that's it. And value expertise. Okay. Now there are people out there in the world who are incompetent. A scary thing would be having a doctor who suffers from a metacognition problem, who does not reference other doctors, does not do research. They are out there. So I'm not telling you that every person who has PhD or MD at the end of their name is necessarily brilliant, but don't use that as an excuse to not value expertise. Okay. Um, so in your case, have you ever caught yourself falling into this trap yourself, or have you experienced this in your life? I'm sure you have. I mean, this is pretty widespread. So, if you'd like to leave a comment, I'd love to hear your story about your experience with the Dunning-Kruger effect. Whether it's a workplace scenario, maybe a family scenario, whatever it might be. I really would be really interested in hearing about that from you if you'd like to. But yeah, just hopefully we close a little bit with a couple of the quotes again here. I've already kind of scrolled these by, but I love this one here from Neil deGrasse Tyson. One of the great challenges in life is knowing enough to think you're right, but not enough to know you're wrong. And I think that sums it up really well. And so hopefully this has been helpful. And please consider liking, sharing, subscribing. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.